Hi, thank you, Sebastian, and thank you, Erica, for organizing such a spectacular event. I'm Ben-Sasson with StarkWare, and I want to tell you a little bit about the technology that underlies StarkNet, and mostly to invite you, especially developers or teams that want scale on Ethereum with Ethereum security, but scale that is befitting real-world applications, to consider learning StarkNet, Cairo, joining our thriving ecosystem. So the story of Starks and StarkNet and StarkWare goes back 30 years. There's been a lot of research in areas that are often called moon math, to reflect that they are very, sort of a little bit like rocket science-y, things that are very exciting but also seem inaccessible, and feels like computational complexity and cryptography that are the underpinnings of what StarkNet is today. And what this technology does at its core is something very desirable. It gives you integrity. Integrity was beautifully defined by the novelist C.S. Lewis as doing the right thing even when no one is watching. And when our data is held by others and means so much in our digitized world today, it is very important for us to know that the right thing, the right computation is done with our data, even when we are not watching, and even when no one we trust is watching. And this ability of knowing that things are done in the right way, even when no one is watching, is exactly what these 30 years of deep math have shown that can be done. So our technology, Starks, gives you integrity. Now, how is this connected to blockchains or BUIDL? Well, this part involves a lot of hard work and engineering and development that has been done initially by the team at StarkWare and now inside the StarkNet ecosystem. So taking this marvelous technology, cryptography and math, and converting it into a system that is usable by everyday users involves a lot of very hard work. And at StarkWare, and I think also at StarkNet, I think that things like marketing and storytelling are not our strength. Our strength is in working hard and delivering usable code, and that's what we've achieved. And today, this technology is the largest source of scale on Ethereum today. Tens of millions of NFTs have been minted using this technology on Ethereum. Hundreds of millions of transactions and hundreds of billions of dollars on L2s have been settled by this technology, thanks to the hard work that made this moon math a reality. And now I want to give you some more details. And especially I want to focus on there's one thing that we need to improve, which is decentralization, and this is going to be also the focus of this talk. So let's go back to the essentials and the premises of blockchain and the way it disrupts the world that we know. So this is the current state of affairs, right? On the left, we have the conventional model that we all know from, let's say, banks and pension funds and healthcare systems, where all of our data is maintained and computed by trusted central parties. And blockchain, its main disruption, so blockchain does everything worse, but for one thing that it does different and better, and that is in basing trust on an inclusive property where everyone is invited to come and check the integrity of the system. So as a result, in the case of a single central trusted party, you can also trust a very big computer. And you get something that is fast, but the way you account for its integrity and check and know that the system is doing the right thing, well, this is not done in an inclusive manner. You and I cannot check the integrity of the banking system. It's an exclusive thing. There are certain parties, auditors, regulators that are entrusted with this task. But in blockchains, everything is very inclusive. We are all invited to be part of the nodes running the network and checking that everything is fine. This is terrific, but we pay with scale. So blockchains are slow, but inclusive, whereas the conventional world is fast, but exclusive. And the big challenge is, how do we get the best of both worlds? How do we get things that are fast, have large scale, but are still inclusive under the same principles, where integrity is based on things that we can all check and verify on our laptops? How do we get this big scale? So one thing that is not a good option is to increase the gas per block, or the scale, you know, the block size. If it was Bitcoin, what would happen is that slowly the system would devolve into a very small number of big nodes, and you and I, using our laptops, will not be able to track what's going on. So this is not a good option. This would fall back. This would make the new world, disruptive world, look very much like the old world. So Starks offer a better way, a long-term, future-proof way to solve this problem and give you fast, inclusive systems under the same security premises as blockchains operate today. So if you think about Ethereum, so all of our systems are deployed on Ethereum. We are a layer 2 on Ethereum. And let's see how things look today. So if we're going to use Ethereum as a layer 1, we're going to allow all the nodes of the network to process each and every transaction. And that's how we get integrity, right? Everything we just naively re-executed on all nodes of the network. If you use one of the Stark-based systems, you do something else. You take all of the transactions, but instead of asking each node to process them, you allow an off-chain big computer to process these transactions. However, after processing the transactions, that big computer must produce a mathematical cryptographic proof of the integrity of the computation. And it sends it to the blockchain. And then all nodes of the blockchain, instead of processing the transactions, they just verify the correctness of the proof, and then they will accept a change to the state of the system. So this is how Starks work today. This is how we've minted tens of millions of NFTs, settled hundreds of billions of dollars, and ran hundreds of millions of transactions, all of them with integrity. The point is that the math and cryptography of Starks prove to you that the right thing was done even when no one is watching. So if we, for instance, StarkWare, would like to, for one of our customers, let's say Immutable for minting NFTs, or DYDX, which settles, for which we settle perpetual trading orders. Suppose we wanted to do something that is not the right thing. It would be impossible for us to generate a Stark proof that is supposed to attest to this invalid state transition. It is impossible for us. The math and cryptography prevents us from being able to create such a thing. And this way, instead of asking the nodes of the network to process each and every transaction, we simply ask them instead to verify a Stark proof and then accept a change to the system. So crucially, there are no trusted assumptions about the prover. Anyone can run the prover. You can ask Darth Vader to run the prover, and you can still trust the result of the computation. The other amazing thing about this technology is that verifying a proof is exponentially cheaper than running and processing all transactions that are asserted by the proof. In particular, something we do day in and day out many times today in our production systems is take a batch of transactions that if you try to settle them on the blockchain or to run them through the blockchain naively, you would probably have to pay upwards of 5 billion gas, sometimes 10x more. Instead of that, we generate a proof which verifying it costs around 5 million gas, give or take. And thereby you achieve a factor 1,000, sometimes it's 10,000x, better scale. And this is not some promise of something that can be done tomorrow. This has been running in production for more than a year over multiple systems. This is the reality today, and it is the only L2 scaling solution in which the core technology that supports its security is running as promised today in production, the only one. So a little bit about StarkWare and the StarkNet story. StarkWare is a company that is 4.5 years old. And over these, I just want to mention 4 major milestones. Initially, we took the math and worked very, very hard to build by hand a system of constraints, mathematical constraints that captures the settlement of transactions and the minting of NFTs and things like that. And this was very hard work. This was the first thing we did. And this is the StarkX system. It's a standalone layer 2 for things like trading and minting of NFTs and assets and perpetual swaps and things like that. Then the team realized that trying to scale on this and write more and more efficient code is not sustainable. So we need something that works a little bit better in terms of feature velocity, that we can add things securely and safely. And we created a programming language that abstracts away all of the math and cryptography and just lets you write things as a developer. And this is Cairo, and we generated it because we needed it for internal use to be able to build better and better systems. And indeed we did that and built better systems with more functionality, and we're keeping to do this. We're continuing to do this. But we then realized that it makes sense to open up this framework that we've been using, this Turing-complete programming language for all of the world to use, and we even need to make it decentralized and allow everyone to build on it, basically making it a sort of blockchain of its own, a layer 2, and that is StarkNet. So StarkNet is a layer 2 validity rollup based on Starks, offering the whole world the scale that is given by the math and cryptography that is Starks. And from now on, I just want to focus on StarkNet and tell you where it is at today and what comes next. And I hope some of you will be interested to learn more about it and maybe join the ecosystem. So StarkNet, we announced it roughly 1.5 years ago. Half a year later, we already had testnet. 2 months later, we deployed it in alpha. Today, it's running in alpha. And just like 2 weeks ago, we announced the continuation of the decentralization part. So there's a very useful set of tools today. There's a testnet, there's a mainnet in alpha. A lot of teams are deploying on it. If you're a developer, please look into it. A lot of tooling and a lot of documentation to start working. There are 3 phases that all of them, our focus changes over time. First, we wanted to have feature completeness, and this is something that we're still working on, adding better versions of the programming language, more tooling. The second phase that we're in right now is delivering higher throughput and higher scale. We hope to reach 10x the throughput of Ethereum at a cost per transaction of 1% of Ethereum's cost within this year, within 2022. And if you know a little bit about StarkWare, you know that when we make announcements and promise things, we usually stand by schedule or a little bit earlier than that. I know it's not that common always in blockchain world, but we stand by our word. The third phase that we just announced is the continuation of decentralization, which involves a token and a foundation, and I'll say a little bit about that. But first, the StarkNet culture today is a self-selecting one. So StarkNet, as I said, requires hard work. And we at StarkWare are very proud of the fact that we excel at delivering high quality, production-grade products. We focus on that and less on telling stories, marketing, and Twitter presence. So maybe you didn't hear so much about us, but that's because we're busy building and working and less talking. So the nature of the beast is that because it involves hard work and is very cutting edge, it involves the kind of builders who like to do things like this. They like new technology that has great potential and even though it may be rough around the edges. And the kind of developers that we have also are the kind that say, if I need something and it doesn't exist, I build it. So there are a lot of builders out there, a lot of separate teams that are part of this ecosystem. And it just seems to be the case that the kind of ecosystem we have has a lot of folks that are very curious, very bright, open-minded, supportive, accepting, and it's a worldwide community all around, including in these regions. There was just, I think, the very first StarkNet meetup in Malaysia, and there's going to be events here. You can, search for them throughout the week and later on. So there's shamans is our version of magicians and core developers. There's you can Google all these things. You can look for StarkNet tutorials written by multiple independent teams around the world. There are workshops and hackathons, again, being done by teams outside of StarkWare, meetups, conferences, newsletters, informational websites. All you need to do is just Google StarkNet and start enjoying it. The one thing you should be aware of is, of course, scams always abound. So, if you see anything about token and airdrops and so on that doesn't come from the 3 blogs that I'll mention in a minute, beware of scammers, right? That's not from us. So there are more than 1,000 developers that we know of that are working full-time on StarkNet, writing in Cairo and writing tooling around it. We handed out more than 200 grants to all kinds of developers. These are grants in, basically in fiat currency. There are more than 400 GitHub repos. 20 companies that we know of have raised the total accumulated amount of $100 million from various VCs and investors, focusing only on building things on StarkNet. So this is, it seems that also the investor world seems to be hopeful about this area. There have been more than 5 hackathons. I think we should stop putting a counter there because it's hard to even track, and a lot of education going on by, again, separate independent teams outside of StarkWare's efforts. So now I want to tell you in the remaining part about the token and the foundation and next steps, because this is something we just posted 2 weeks ago. You can take this QR code and start there. It's a 3-part blog series that goes into a lot of details about our plans, and that's what I want to share with you for the rest of the talk, our plans for decentralization. So the way we thought about it is inspired by it. It's not exactly, but it's inspired by a problem that StarkWare faced early on in its career. As I said, we came and said, okay, there's this amazing moon math that is not yet implemented. It's core infrastructure that allows scale and solves the problem of integrity in a better way, in a future-proof way, and it needs to be part of all blockchains. It needs to be some public good. So we said, we thought that our business model as a company would be that we deploy Starks on chain X, and we get token X as part of this deal. But the problem we noticed early on is that chains, blockchains just don't work this way. They don't, usually the foundation, the way the system works, is not built, or it doesn't, factor in developers that come later on. Often it factors in the early team and things like that, but like if you come 2 years later, there isn't a good mechanism to give you a way to build and be part of the system inside the token model. So we moved to other things, which is how StarkX came about and StarkNet. But now when it's our turn to define and design token dynamics, then we're inspired by this problem that we had. And we want it to be the case that if you build the technology, even in the future, you get tokens automatically as part of the protocol. So developers are getting and will get native tokens of the StarkNet system for the work that they are doing in advancing StarkNet. And because of this, both the governance decision and also the operation of the proof-of-stake system that is StarkNet will be always bringing in a way that is inclusive, new developer teams that are doing valuable work for it. And this way, we have inclusivity and upwards mobility and the ability to join the network and be rewarded for work by it into the future. So these are the things that are underpinning our design. So we announced that StarkNet will have both a foundation and tokens. So why foundation? The foundation's mission is to maintain StarkNet as a public good, something that is non-exclusionary and non-rivalrous. We want the foundation also to develop, test, and implement community decision-making processes. That's its mission. The token is needed in order to, first of all, define and identify StarkNet as a community. It's needed for governance, for influencing decisions that impact StarkNet. And it's also needed, and this I'm going to spend a few more words about later, it's needed for paying fees for work. And these fees are going to go to developers for the work they're doing, and also to operators of the system. So the foundation is going to be funded by a one-time grant from StarkWare, and it's going to receive slightly upwards of 50% of the tokens, and details on the foundation are going to arrive soon. The token is going to be required for influencing decisions, for instance, voting on upgrades to the StarkNet operating system, and this will start very soon. It's also going to be used much later on for paying transaction fees for transactions on StarkNet. Will require that. And also it will be needed for staking in order to be part of the proof of stake based mechanism for electing the operators of StarkNet. In StarkNet we have both sequencers and provers, Stark provers, and we will ensure that there is code, source available code usable for everyone inside StarkNet to operate as a sequencer or as a prover. So inside the blog post, we've mentioned that 10 billion tokens have been minted, and roughly the left goes to, which is roughly slightly less than 50% goes to previous parties, and roughly 50% goes through the foundation to community and to developers and so on. And I want to say a little bit more about specific parts here. I also want to mention that these 10 billion tokens are just part of the initial token allocation, and there will be more minting ongoing and as common with other blockchains later on. So now I want to focus just a little bit on some of the things inside. So first of all, core contributors include this part, which is roughly 1/3, includes StarkWare employees and consultants. Everything on this side comes with a 4-year lockup and 1-year cliff with gradual release, so that things are aligned, the incentives of those working here and the network. And we also have, this part also covers a large and growing set of developer partners of StarkNet, Consensus, Open Zeppelin, Lambda classes, and the list goes on and on. So this is the part of the folks that are building, that are already known to the ecosystem and have been allocated tokens. Of the 50% that goes to the foundation, 18% are going to go to the community of users, both through a provisions mechanism to basically reward users of the technology and those who are in the area of supporting decentralized blockchains and operating them. And also there's going to be a rebate mechanism for basically when people are moving from other blockchains or layer ones into StarkNet, offsetting some of the costs, the L1 costs that they pay. Another thing, developers first, as I said. So roughly 45% are allocated to core contributors, grants, and also, in addition to that, fees and ongoing minting is going to go to developers, in addition to going to the operators of the network. And I want to focus on that now. So developers are doing the work needed to build, maintain, and improve StarkNet. And we want them to get StarkNet tokens for the work that they are doing, so that they, one, can influence the StarkNet governance, because we use the token for governance decisions, and also so they are the ones operating it, because it's a proof of stake based system. So we want developers to be invited to participate in both these things, make their voice heard, and operate the system and be rewarded for it. Now here, there are two kinds of developer classes. there are the developers whose contributions and value can be measured in some way by the StarkNet system. For instance, if you wrote a smart contract, people who like it will be paying fees to use it, and we can measure in an objective way how much value users are assigning to this smart contract. There are also the very important class of developers who are writing things that are in the background, where the StarkNet system cannot measure their contribution. These are the core developers writing software for provers, for sequencers, infrastructure, and things like that. So what we're going to do is that things that can be automatically measured by the StarkNet system are going to get, the developers of that technology are going to get automatically tokens for their work. So a fraction of the L2 fees paid for smart contracts is going to go to addresses controlled by the developers of those smart contracts. And likewise, a fraction of minting of new issuance of tokens is going to go to developers of smart contracts to basically cover for a portion of the L1 fees that are paid and burned on Ethereum for these things. Core developers are going to get by a more human discretionary mechanism, but we want it also to be deeply influenced by the developers at the rations that they are getting tokens for their work, the smart contract developers. So developers receive token grants before any community or user community rebates and provisions go out. Developers will receive a portion of fees and minting to compensate them for their work, to give them a say on governance, to allow them to operate the system, and to encourage newcomer developers to do work on StarkNet. Hopefully this will make StarkNet a public good, like Ethereum, and then StarkNet will scale Ethereum to meet global demand. And because StarkNet is a layer 2 of Ethereum, and if you're on Ethereum, a rainbow is called for, so we're all happy and there's a rainbow. And I just want to take a zooming out and say, just summarize everything that I talked about. And then I'll have Tommy think for a couple of questions. So there's this new infrastructure blockchain that basically bases trust on an inclusive and decentralized network of nodes. This new technology requires some new, makes some new challenges, poses some new challenges. And we took very old and very complicated moon math and showed that it can help scale this network. It requires a lot of work to show that this moon math can actually help scale, and culminates with StarkNet, which is this open ecosystem that everyone can use to scale Ethereum today uses. And I urge you to join the fast-growing ecosystem of developers building on it, which is StarkNet. And if you want more information, so I'll be around here, and also Ben from StarkWare, who's with a StarkWare blue shirt, is also around. Please come to us and talk to us. We'd love to, show you how to be more involved. So thank you very much, and if there are any questions, happy to answer.